My name is Jenna. I'm 33 years old, live in Chicago, and work in product operations at a mid-sized tech company. My life is not dramatic. I drink the same coffee every morning. I take the same train. I plan the same birthday gifts for coworkers I barely know. But 3 months ago, on an ordinary Friday, my life split in two. It started with a text from my cousin Beth. A photo. 9 of my family members dressed in matching resort polos smiling on the deck of a cruise ship. Behind them, the sun was setting over the Mediterranean. I zoomed in and noticed something strange. There was a woman missing from that photo, the one who always stood front and center. My grandmother Mary. At first, I told myself she must have taken the picture. She hated being in photos anyway. But then I checked Instagram. Beth had posted a video. It showed the full deck, every family member gathered around a giant seafood buffet. No camera in Mary's hand. No smile in the background. She wasn't there. I called her expecting her usual warm hello. Instead, her voice was a whisper. She said she was just tired, that she preferred the peace and quiet, that they had offered, but she turned them down. I knew that wasn't true. Mary loved the noise. She loved dancing in the living room with old jazz records. She loved cooking for 10, even if only 3 showed up. She once made a roast at 2 in the morning because she remembered my sister liked it after long flights. Quiet wasn't Mary. Silence wasn't her language. So I asked her if I could stop by. She paused, then said sure. I asked if she was celebrating at all. She said she had a little cake in the fridge. That was it. That night, I sat in a rooftop bar in downtown Chicago, a few hours away from receiving an award at work. Something about leadership and contribution. The plaque was already engraved. My coworkers were buzzing with wine and congratulations. But all I could think about was a 75-year-old woman sitting alone with a cake. A woman who had spent her whole life making sure everyone else never felt alone. At 8:15 p.m., I texted my boss and said I wouldn't be able to make the ceremony. Then I got in my car and drove. It took almost 3 hours to get to her house. The interstate was quiet, the streetlights melting into the windshield. I didn't play music. I didn't call anyone. I just drove and kept thinking of all the times she had shown up for me when no one else did. When I was 9, I missed my class picture because I was sick. She took me to Sears and had a solo portrait made just to make me feel special. When I was 16 and my mom forgot to pick me up from softball practice, she came even though it was pouring rain. She always showed up. That was her love language. Showing up. When I pulled into her driveway, the porch light was on. I saw a small, flickering glow through the front window. I thought for a second, maybe the cake was lit already. When I knocked, there was a pause. Then she opened the door, slowly smiling with her whole face, like she had been waiting for this all day. I stepped inside. The kitchen table had been set for 10. Cloth napkins embroidered with initials, silverware lined up with precision, and in the center, a cake slightly leaning with 75 written in blue frosting. One candle was still burning. She said she hadn't wanted to waste the decorations. Said maybe the neighbors would drop by. But they hadn't. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and vanilla icing. There was music playing faintly from the old CD player. It was Nat King Cole. I hugged her and didn't say anything. She didn't ask why I came. We both sat down, just the 2 of us. She cut 2 slices. We ate quietly. She told me she had paid for the cruise herself, that she wanted to treat the family before the end of the year. But when the plans were finalized, they told her they assumed she wouldn't want to come. Too much walking, they said. Too many stairs. Too loud. I asked if that hurt her. She looked down and adjusted her bracelet. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. They told her she could still pay for it. That would make her feel included, that she could feel like part of the gift. And so she signed the check. I couldn't speak. I just sat there looking at the cake at the candle, now melted halfway. I realized in that moment this wasn't about the cruise. It wasn't even about the money. It was about being seen, being valued, being counted. She was 75, and her whole life had been about making everyone else feel important. And now, when it mattered most, she had been treated like an afterthought. That was the moment everything changed for me. That night wasn't a celebration. It was a revelation. One that would set everything in motion. The porch light flickered slightly as I walked up the steps. The glass on the front door had a faint smudge, like someone had pressed their forehead to it too long. When she opened it, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Vanilla. Not from a candle, but real sugar, real butter. The kind of scent that wraps around you, not asks for attention. Her smile was gentle, a little forced. I could see it didn't reach her eyes. She looked smaller than I remembered. Her hair still curled the way she always wore it had more gray than it used to. Her blouse was carefully ironed. Pearls at her collar. She had dressed for company even if no one had arrived. Inside the kitchen glowed with a soft yellow light. Not warm exactly, more like the glow of effort. The table was set for 10. Each place had a cloth napkin folded into a triangle. Her good silverware lined up with quiet precision. At the center sat a white cake domed with whipped frosting. 75, written in blue letters. 3 candles. One of them, still flickering, bent slightly from the heat. She gestured for me to sit like nothing was out of place. I didn't ask questions. I just took the seat next to hers. She reached for the knife, then stopped. Her hands trembled slightly. I offered to cut it. She nodded and passed the knife without a word. We ate in silence. The first bite tasted like lemon. The cake was soft, still fresh, still warm. She must have baked it just a few hours ago. I looked around. The china cabinet had been polished. The floor was swept. There were extra chairs pushed up against the wall. She had prepared for a crowd. There was a note card propped on each plate. Not names, but little messages. Mine said, "I always make her proud." The one next to it said something about laughter. I didn't read them all. I couldn't. I wanted to ask where everyone was, but I already knew. I'd seen the cruise photos. They were sipping cocktails in the sun. The ones she had raised, the ones she had paid for. She reached for her tea and sipped slowly. The spoon clinked softly in the cup. Then she said it as if she were mentioning the weather. That she had written the check for the cruise. Said she wanted to give them one last gift. Something to remember her by. I stared at her. She looked straight ahead, not at me. Her voice didn't crack. She didn't frown. She had accepted it. They told her she wouldn't enjoy it. That it would be too loud too fast, too hard to move around. They told her she'd prefer the peace and quiet, and she believed them. Or tried to. She said she was glad they were making memories. Said she didn't want to be in the way. Then she smiled a little, almost like she was convincing herself more than me. That she got to eat cake in her own kitchen. That was enough. I didn't say anything for a while. I couldn't. Every word I thought of felt small. I watched the candle burn down, the wax curling around itself, slowly melting into the frosting. She reached over and placed her hand on mine. It was soft, still warm, like the cake. Her eyes were tired but steady. I squeezed her hand and kept eating. There was nothing to fix, nothing to undo. Just this moment. and the quiet, and the knowing that the warmest room in the world can still feel empty. After we finished the cake, she rinsed the plates and I offered to stay the night. She waved me off with a soft laugh, said I had a real bed waiting for me somewhere else. But I didn't leave. I wandered into the living room while she tidied the kitchen. The air smelled like lavender. The old recliner still had a knitted blanket folded across the back, the same one I used to wrap around my shoulders when I was a kid and scared of thunderstorms. I sat down and looked around at the photos. There was one of me on her lap holding a sparkler. Another of us at the zoo, both wearing matching visors. I must have been 6 or 7. She always said we were the same kind of odd. Quiet in crowds, loud in kitchens. Loyal to the ones who looked past our quiet. She came in and sat across from me, her hands folded. That's when I saw it. The bracelet. A clumsy thing made from green plastic beads and elastic string. I gave it to her when I was 10, thinking it was the most beautiful thing in the world. I remember her saying she would wear it forever. And she had. It was frayed, now stretched thin, but still there on her wrist like it belonged. I asked her why she still wore it. She smiled and said it reminded her of someone who loved her for her. Not her money, not her cooking, not the holidays she hosted. Just her. Later that night, after she had gone to bed, I stayed behind to help clean up. I wanted to make sure she wouldn't wake to a mess. While stacking linens in the hallway closet, I knocked over a tin box. It landed with a soft thud, the lid slightly open. Inside, under old photos and expired coupons, was a folded piece of paper. The seal was faded, but intact. It was a will. I sat down on the hallway carpet, the overhead bulb humming faintly. I unfolded it slowly. It was dated nearly 10 years ago, signed by her and witnessed. It named me as her sole heir. No conditions, no clauses, just my name, in her neat cursive. My heart stuttered a little. I hadn't expected that. She had never mentioned it, never hinted. I felt a strange swirl in my chest. Gratitude, guilt, confusion. Why me? Why not my mother or my uncle or the others who had always spoken louder, taken more space? Then I remembered the bracelet. The way she held my hand when I cried over middle school bullies. The time she drove through a snowstorm just to bring me soup when I had the flu. All those moments weren't transactions. They were choices. Quiet, consistent, unwavering choices. She had seen me. All along. Not just the good grades, not just the polite thank yous. She had seen the real me and chosen me. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Not from sadness, from the weight of being loved like that. A love that never announced itself. It just stayed. I refolded the paper and placed it back. I didn't take a photo. I didn't even tell her. It wasn't time. I just sat there in the hallway next to the box of secrets and let myself breathe. Really breathe. For the first time in a long time. The next morning, I brewed coffee in her kitchen while she rested in her room. The house was still. No phone rang. No one dropped by. I wandered through the hallway again, still turning over the weight of that folded will in my mind. Something didn't sit right. That afternoon, a neighbor stopped by to return a book. She was friendly, a woman in her 60s with bright eyes and a Boston accent. We chatted on the porch, and she casually mentioned how generous it was of my mother to take over things. How sweet it was that she handled the paperwork after Mary started getting forgetful. I felt my jaw tighten. Forgetful Mary balanced her checkbook better than I ever had. She still remembered where she bought her teacups 30 years ago. I asked what she meant. The neighbor leaned in and said my mother had told everyone Mary didn't want the burden of decisions anymore. Said it was too much for her at her age. That she had requested help. I thanked her and closed the door. Then I sat down in the armchair and tried to breathe. Slowly, that breath turned into something hot and heavy. I texted my mother and asked to call. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was bright, too bright. She asked if I was still in town. I said yes. I told her I had seen the will. I told her about the check Mary wrote for the cruise. There was a pause, and then she laughed lightly and said Mary was confused, that she'd been struggling lately, that the updated documents reflected the reality of the situation. I asked her when Mary had signed this new will. She said last year. I asked who witnessed it. She got quiet. Then she said it was fine, that I didn't need to worry. She had consulted a lawyer. Everything was done to protect the family. I said Mary wasn't confused, that I had spoken to her, that she remembered every detail. And then I asked her directly, "Did you sign on her behalf?" There was silence. Then she said it didn't matter, that families help each other, that sometimes decisions have to be made for the greater good. My voice shook when I asked if she had told Mary about the cruise being her gift. She said yes, but in a tone that felt like a lie dressed as logic. She said it was better this way, that old people didn't belong on cruises, that it was too risky, that Mary should rest. I ended the call before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I opened the old metal lockbox in the hallway closet. It took me a while to find the key, taped under the third drawer. Inside were documents, original titles, insurance papers, receipts from more than a decade ago. Tucked into a yellow envelope was a packet marked Estate Plan, 2013. It was notarized. Inside was a power of attorney form, signed by Mary, assigning me as her medical and financial proxy. It had never been revoked. I sat there for a long time, trying to process it. My mother had known. She had either ignored it or pretended it didn't exist. Either way, she had taken something that wasn't hers to take. She didn't just rearrange papers. She rewrote my grandmother's truth. Turned her into a fragile, forgetful woman, so no one would question why she was absent from every photo, from every decision, from her own life. I looked around the house. This wasn't just a place. It was Mary's legacy. Every picture, every drawer, every chipped plate told a story, and they had tried to erase her. That night, I stayed awake reading everything in that box. Her hand was on every page. Her words were clear. Her mind was intact. Her choices were deliberate, and they were being buried under convenience and quiet betrayal. By morning, I had made up my mind. I called a local attorney and asked what it would take to file for legal guardianship. She asked me a few questions. Then she asked why I was doing this. I told her the truth. Because someone had to show up. Because someone had to say no. Because someone had to be the witness Mary deserved. The process took days. Forms, signature statements. I collected photos, timelines, emails. I recorded Mary speaking clearly. I documented everything I could. My mother texted me a few times, first asking what I was doing, then accusing me of being dramatic, then warning me that this would tear the family apart. But the truth is, the family was already broken. It had been for years. The difference was, now I wasn't pretending otherwise. I wasn't trying to win. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I just wanted Mary to be seen, to be protected, to be honored for who she was, not managed like a task, not filed away like a burden. And in doing that, something shifted in me. I had spent most of my life being quiet, being the one who didn't ask for much, who stayed out of the way. But not this time. This time, I wasn't stepping back. This time, I was going to be the one who showed up. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold coffee, the kind of air that hangs too long under fluorescent lights. I sat near the front, my heart beating in that low, nervous rhythm. Mary sat beside me in a wheelchair, a thin shawl draped over her shoulders. Her bracelet, my bracelet, still on her wrist. Her hands folded, calm, or maybe resigned. The judge entered promptly at 9. A woman in her 60s, stern-faced but not unkind. I stood when asked, introduced myself, and submitted the petition for guardianship. Along with it, I placed 3 folders on the table. One with the original estate documents, one with medical records showing no signs of cognitive impairment, and the last with printed emails, text messages, and notarized notes from neighbors who had seen Mary lucid functioning independent. Across from me, my mother sat stiffly in a navy suit. Her lawyer, sleek and polished, adjusted his tie before speaking. He claimed concern, claimed Mary had moments of confusion, that the new will updated in their presence reflected her wishes more clearly. He called her fragile, said the cruise had been a collective decision for her safety. Every word landed like a lie wrapped in silk. Then they did the one thing I hadn't expected. They called Mary to speak. I felt my throat tighten. We hadn't planned this. She hadn't been prepped. She was tired, and the courtroom wasn't gentle. I rose to object, but Mary gently placed her hand over mine. Then she stood. Slowly, steadily, she rose from the wheelchair. Her voice, soft but firm, carried across the room. She looked directly at the judge and said she had written a will a decade ago, that she had chosen me, that she never revoked that choice, that she remembered everything. She looked at my mother and said something so quiet yet sharp, it cut through the air. That being old didn't mean being invisible. That kindness wasn't permission for betrayal. And then she turned to the room and said the words that burned through every wall. She said I was the only one who came, that I was the one who drove 3 hours just to sit and eat cake, that I didn't ask for anything. I just showed up. No one moved. Not the bailiff, not the clerk. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. Then Mary sat down, exhaled slowly, and folded her hands again. The courtroom was silent for a full minute. The judge thanked her. Then she asked my mother's lawyer if he had further evidence. He looked down, shuffled some papers, said no. The judge read her notes quietly, then looked at us both. She granted my petition for guardianship, in full. She stated that there was no evidence of incapacity, that the older documents were legal and binding, that the actions taken by my mother could be viewed as exerting undue influence. She didn't press charges, but she issued a formal warning. Stated clearly that further attempts to override legal decisions would be considered elder manipulation. No one clapped, no one cried. There was only the sound of truth taking its rightful place. Mary turned to me and whispered that she was tired now. I nodded. I wheeled her outside into the afternoon light. She blinked a little, then smiled. Said the sun felt good. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel righteous. I felt like I had pulled someone back from a ledge, not because I had all the answers, but because I refused to look away. We didn't talk much on the way home. She napped. I drove. Later that evening, I heated soup, and we sat at the same table where the cake had once been. I asked her if she was scared in there. She shook her head. said the truth had a weight that held her steady, that when she spoke, it felt like her lungs could breathe fully again. I asked her why she never told me about the will. She said she wanted me to be surprised one day, that she thought she had time, that she didn't know people she loved would move faster than she could. That hurt to hear. But it also made me understand something deeper. Sometimes people don't fight back because they don't believe they're allowed to. Sometimes it takes someone younger to remind them that they matter enough to be defended. The next morning, we ate breakfast on the porch. She read the paper. I scrolled through my phone. My mother hadn't messaged since the hearing. My aunt sent a vague apology. One of my cousins liked a photo I posted of Mary's garden, but no one called. And that was fine. Because Mary smiled in the sun. Because her house was hers again. Because she was no longer a footnote in someone else's plan. And I, for the first time, felt what it meant to take a stand. Not in anger, not in defiance, but in love. Love that protects. Love that names what others try to erase. Love that doesn't sit quietly when someone dims another's light. That courtroom had been cold. The walls, the faces, the language. But Mary's voice burned through all of it, like a match in a snowstorm. Small, steady, refusing to go out. And because of that, the whole room had to turn toward her. I moved in with Mary 2 weeks after the court hearing. It wasn't a decision. It just happened. Like water finding the lowest place and filling it. She didn't ask, and I didn't explain. I just unpacked my things and started making coffee every morning at 7. At first, she was fine. She read the paper, folded laundry, watched her favorite baking shows with a running commentary that made me laugh. But some days were different. She would ask me if the mail had come even if it was already open on the table. She'd tell me the same story about her wedding dress 3 times in a row. She called me by my mother's name once, then caught herself embarrassed. I told her it was okay, because it was. Then one morning I was tying her shoes, and she looked at me and called me Mom. I froze. Not because it hurt, but because she looked so certain, so calm. I didn't correct her. I just smiled and tied the second lace. She patted my head the way she used to when I was small. She started doing it more, calling me Mom. Sometimes just under her breath. Sometimes while holding my hand. At first, it made my chest ache. But then I realized it wasn't confusion. It was comfort. Somewhere in her mind, Mom meant the one who stayed. The one who came back. The one who brought soup and folded the towels just right. I cleared out the living room one afternoon. Took down old photos. Not out of anger, out of need. Some faces didn't belong anymore. Some smiles were no longer true. I kept the ones that made her light up. The one of us at the zoo. The bracelet on her wrist. I put up fresh flowers. Played her favorite records. The house felt lighter. She started humming while cooking again. Even if she forgot the sugar. Even if we had to eat cereal some nights. It didn't matter. The warmth had returned. In pieces. In quiet ways. One afternoon, a letter came. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from my mother. 3 pages, no apology, just a story about how as a child she had always felt second, how Mary doted on me the way she had once hoped for herself, how she didn't know how to deal with that feeling even as an adult. She didn't say sorry, but she said she finally understood. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I folded the letter and placed it in the box with Mary's old documents. It belonged there, not erased, not forgiven, just filed away. Seen. That night, Mary called me Mom again. I kissed her forehead and told her to sleep. She smiled and closed her eyes. I sat beside her in the chair, listening to her breathing. Slow, steady. I no longer carried the need to be right, to be praised, to be chosen. I had already been chosen a long time ago, when she wore that green plastic bracelet to my graduation, when she made soup in a storm, when she waited at 75 for a family that never came, except me. She didn't need to remember my name to know who I was. I was hers, and that was enough. If you're still here, still watching, maybe you know the kind of quiet I'm talking about. The one that settles in when a table is set for more than one but no one shows. Maybe you've been the one waiting, or the one who never came back. If you've ever felt like an afterthought, like a background character in your own family, I just want to say this. I see you, and I'm sorry. Not because I caused it, but because I know how heavy that silence can be. And if you're lucky enough to still have someone who waits for you, maybe it's time to call, or write, or drive back without a reason. You don't need a holiday, just a moment, a warm dinner, a shared memory, a soft light in the hallway. Think of the one person who never gave up on you, the one who folded the napkins, lit the candle, and left the porch light on. Maybe they're still there, maybe they're not, but you can still honor them in the way you love, in the way you show up. Leave a comment if someone like that comes to mind. A memory, a story, a single moment you'll never forget. And if this video reminded you of someone, send it to them. Let them know they're not invisible, not forgotten. Because sometimes healing doesn't look like big gestures. Sometimes it's just sitting at the table, cutting the cake, and staying. And if no one's told you this lately, I will. You matter, and someone somewhere is glad you're still here.